In the dusty village of Akor, where women were taught from birth that their greatest purpose was to marry well and bear children, there lived a woman who shattered every expectation. Her name was Annette, and she was neither docile nor desperate. Unlike the other girls who waited patiently to be chosen by a husband, Annette chose herself, every single day. She walked through Akor like a storm wrapped in silk. Her beauty was undeniable, but it was her defiance that made people talk. While others played the role of obedient daughters and modest wives, Annette carved a different path. She saw love not as a sacred bond, but as a transaction. And she played the game better than anyone. To her, relationships were not about romance or commitment. They were contracts, silent agreements between power and desire. She offered pleasure, companionship, adventure, but never submission. And in return, she demanded wealth, respect, and autonomy. Many of the married women in Akor resented her. They whispered behind closed doors, threw cutting glances her way, and clung tighter to their husbands whenever Annette passed by. But she didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled, boldly, provocatively. "It's not my fault your husbands prefer my hips to yours," she once said to a group of gossiping women, her voice as calm as morning rain. When younger girls teased her about never marrying, she simply laughed and replied, "Your starving husbands can't even feed you 3 meals a day. Why should I envy that?" Annette was a walking contradiction in a village that worshipped conformity. While the others followed tradition, she rewrote the script. And the men of Akor? They were enchanted, drawn to her like moths to fire. She had mastered the art of seduction, not just with her body, but with her mind, her mystery, her absolute refusal to need anyone. Rumors swirled that even the king himself had once fallen under her spell. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. What mattered was that she had become a symbol of danger, of freedom, of power unshackled by shame. She lived alone, but never lonely. Her home, nestled at the edge of the village, was a sanctuary of silk, incense, and secrets. No man owned her. No ring chained her, and no one could predict her next move. Until one evening, as the sun melted behind the hills and the air thickened with the scent of dust and mango, Annette overheard something that made her heart stir. Not with love, but with calculation. A new visitor was coming to Akor. Not just any visitor, a wealthy chief named Undu, a man whose name was whispered with awe from the east to the central river. Chief Undu wasn't just rich, he was legendary. The biggest palm oil exporter in the region, he was said to dine with kings and deal in gold. To most, his arrival meant a chance for trade, for prestige, for village pride. To Annette, it meant one thing: opportunity. She saw the chief not as a man, but as a door to power, influence, and the kind of wealth that could build her a future no one could take away. This wasn't about romance. This was strategy, the biggest deal she had chased in nearly 2 years. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat by the window, her legs tucked beneath her, eyes fixed on the moon, already mapping the next few days like a chessboard. The next morning, while the village buzzed with anticipation, Annette moved in silence. She summoned her trusted informants, the market seller who overheard everything, the tailor's apprentice who delivered clothes to travellers, and the widow who ran the guest house by the river. What time will he arrive? Where will he stay? Who is travelling with him? Her questions were precise, her tone unfazed. She gathered every scrap of information, filtering rumour from truth with the sharpness of a merchant. Once she had the facts, she retreated. Not to hide, but to prepare. She understood something the others didn't. Seduction was never about appearance alone. It was ritual, a strategy, a performance of detail. During the day, she disappeared from sight. No marketplace strolls, no evening visits. She devoted herself to solitude and precision, herbal baths to soften her skin, sandalwood oil to scent her presence, silk robes tailored to flow like water around her curves. Every movement practiced, every glance rehearsed. She became a weapon honed by intention. At night, she walked alone under the stars, not to dream, but to calculate. Which colours would catch the chief's eye? What tone of voice would make him lean in? She met with tailors in secret, choosing fabrics that shimmered in candlelight, designed to cling in all the right places without ever looking obvious. She wasn't dressing to impress. She was dressing to conquer, and every step she took was a reminder. Annette was no one's victim. She wasn't waiting to be saved. She was building her empire, one carefully chosen move at a time. As the village gossiped and prepared to welcome the honoured guest, No one realized that the real power in Akor didn't sit on a throne or wear a crown. She wore red silk, and she was ready. Chief Undu arrived in Akor just as the sky shifted from bronze to crimson. The village gathered, eager eyes tracking the grand entrance of the convoy. His arrival stirred dust and curiosity. Children stood on tiptoes, elders whispered, traders paused, and somewhere, behind a silk curtain, Annette watched. He was older than she expected, but no less powerful. His presence demanded attention, not by arrogance but by certainty. He didn't move quickly, he didn't need to. The world adjusted to his pace, and Annette, who had seen many men wrapped in gold and ego, tilted her head and smiled. This one was different, but different didn't mean immune. Annette didn't rush, she never chased. Power, she believed, was most seductive when it made others come to you. So, for the first 2 days, she remained a ghost. She allowed the village to breathe in his presence, to offer their gifts, their flattery, their wide-eyed admiration. Meanwhile, she gathered more than just facts. She gathered rhythms. When did he walk? What foods did he favor? Who made him laugh? Who made him retreat? And most importantly, what was he missing that everyone else failed to offer? On the third evening, when the heat had softened and the moon began its quiet ascent, Annette made her move. She didn't wear her brightest dress or her most revealing blouse. Instead, she dressed in muted tones, earthy, mysterious, like a question that begged to be answered. She didn't wait by his chambers. She walked by the river, the very path he took every night after dinner, alone, the same path where he retreated from noise, from ceremony, from expectation. She didn't stop when she saw him. She simply passed, her perfume lingering just long enough to turn his head. And he did turn. "Strange," he said after a moment. "Most people here avoid walking alone." She stopped mid-step, looked over her shoulder. "That's because most people don't enjoy being watched." Undu chuckled, a low, amused sound. "Do you?" Annette turned fully, the moonlight catching the edge of her cheekbone. "Only when it's by someone who understands what they're looking at." That was how it began. A conversation born from silence. No introductions, no declarations, just tension. A thread pulled taut between two forces too clever to pretend otherwise. In the days that followed, their encounters multiplied, never scheduled, always organic. A shared nod at the market, a lingering glance during a village ceremony, a comment whispered so softly no one else could hear. Annette played the long game. She didn't flatter him. She didn't offer herself. Instead, she offered absence, presence, then absence again. It drove him mad. And slowly, Undu began to seek her. He asked her questions disguised as jokes. He sent wine to her home, then apologized for the assumption. He mentioned casually that most women tried too hard, and that he respected restraint. To which she responded, "That's only because you haven't met the right kind of excess." Each interaction was a chess move, each silence a strategy. Annette didn't want to seduce him quickly. She wanted to be unforgettable, irreplaceable. On the 6th night, he invited her to dinner. Alone. In the garden of the guest house, surrounded by lanterns and the quiet hum of night insects. She arrived late. Not too late, but just enough to remind him he wasn't the only one with power. He rose when she entered. No one else had made him do that. "I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind," he said. She sat, slowly. "If I had, would you have eaten alone?" He smiled. "I don't mind solitude." "Then perhaps," she said, unfolding her napkin, "I've come to test that." The meal was a performance, not of flirtation, but of boundaries. He asked about her life. She gave him riddles. He offered tales of his empire. She countered with stories of women who ran theirs in secret. At one point, he leaned in and said, "You're not like the others." She didn't blink. "That's because I've never had the luxury of pretending." For a brief moment, Undu was silent. Not because he was offended, but because he recognized something rare. A woman who could not be bought, only earned. As the dinner ended, he reached for her hand. She allowed it, for a second, then withdrew. "I don't mix wine and negotiations," she said softly. And then she left. Not with a kiss, not with a promise, with power. That night, as he sat alone beneath the lanterns, Undu did something he rarely did. He wondered, who is this woman? What does she want? And most importantly, how did she make him feel like the one being pursued? Days turned into weeks, and the dance between Annette and Chief Undu grew more intricate, more dangerous. What had started as a game of glances and words now simmered with unspoken heat. The villagers began to whisper. Children giggled when they passed. The married women watched with clenched jaws, but Annette, as always, walked unfazed, her chin high, her gaze fixed forward. And yet, even she could feel the shift. Undu was no longer just intrigued. He was invested. He sought her presence, craved her opinions, even disguised visits under the pretense of business. He asked her to walk with him, to dine with him, to stay late and talk about philosophy, trade, legacy. He liked her mind, but he desired her body. Annette knew this pattern. She had seen it many times before. Men who believed desire could be masked as respect. Men who thought wanting her made them powerful, when, in truth, it made them vulnerable. But with Undu, something was different. He listened. Not just to her voice, but to the pauses between her sentences. He noticed when she grew distant, when her smile didn't reach her eyes. He didn't press. He didn't chase. He waited. And that was the most dangerous kind of man. One evening he arrived unannounced at her doorstep. Not with wine or gifts, but with a story. He told her about his first loss, his first betrayal, the first time he realized power couldn't protect him from pain. Annette listened, arms folded, back against the doorframe. When he finished, he looked at her, not with hunger, but with honesty. I'm tired, Annette, of pretending, of being wanted for what I own. She didn't soften, but she didn't close the door either. Then why me? She asked. Because you don't need me, he said, and that's the only kind of woman I want near me. The words lingered in the space between them like incense. That night, she invited him in, not to her bed, but to her table. They ate in silence. They shared glances, not touches. And when he left, he kissed her hand, not possessively, but reverently. Annette sat alone, after he was gone, staring at the flickering candlelight. She felt something she hadn't felt in years, conflicted. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to win, secure the deal, take what she wanted, and move on. But with Undu, the power lines were blurring. Was she using him, or was she being seen? The next morning, a letter arrived, an invitation. Undu was hosting a private gathering at the governor's estate. Wealthy men, political influencers, investors from the capital, and he wanted her. That evening, she wore black, not red, not gold, not anything loud. She wanted to disappear and still be noticed. The event was grand, opulent. Music floated through the halls, laughter echoed against marbled walls. Annette moved like smoke, elegant, untouchable. When Undu saw her, he didn't smile. He nodded, and she nodded back. But halfway through the evening, the balance shifted. A woman appeared, younger, dressed in royal blue, with a voice that rang like silver. Her name was Kamari, a delegate's daughter. Sharp, beautiful, charming. Undu greeted her warmly, too warmly. They shared a long history, someone whispered. There were rumors of an engagement broken, of feelings unresolved. Annette watched from a distance, her expression unreadable. Later, she walked into the courtyard to find air, but instead found Kamari. You must be Annette, Kamari said, tilting her head. He speaks of you often. Annette raised an eyebrow. And yet you don't seem pleased. Kamari smiled, a perfect, polished curve. I'm just surprised. He usually prefers simplicity. Annette leaned in, her voice calm. He's changing. Maybe you should too. They didn't exchange another word, but the war had begun. Back inside, Undu approached. Is everything all right? Annette looked at him for a long moment. Are you still tired of being wanted for what you own? Undu blinked, confused. Of course. She smiled faintly. Then I hope you remember that, when people start offering themselves as gifts. And with that, she left the gathering early. That night, she didn't sleep. For the first time, Annette questioned her own strategy, her feelings, her intent. She had always been in control. But now, her heart was no longer following orders. Was this the game she meant to play? Or had the game started playing her? The weeks that followed the governor's gathering felt like a slow unraveling. The game between Annette and Chief Undu, once so clearly defined, had dissolved into something far more complex, something that no longer followed her rules. Undu didn't chase after the party. He didn't send flowers. He didn't call for explanations. He simply waited, as if he knew that the next move wasn't his to make. And that silence unsettled Annette more than anything. She had always controlled the tempo. When to appear, when to retreat, when to ignite, and when to vanish. But now, she found herself suspended, torn between what she'd always believed power to be, and what it might actually feel like to surrender, just once. Her trusted circle began to notice the shift. "You've changed," said Lamy, the seamstress. "Your dresses are still sharp, but your eyes, they soften." "I'm just tired," Annette replied. But she knew it wasn't fatigue. It was recognition. Recognition that her own armor was cracking. One evening, as she walked along the riverbank where the fishermen used to greet her with whistles and boasts, she met a different kind of quiet. The air was still. The village hushed. And she, unsure. There was no plan for the next day. No strategy. Only a letter. Undu had written it in his own hand. It arrived without a seal, without pomp. "If we strip away our names, our histories, our reputations, what's left? Would you still look at me the same, if I had nothing? Would I still want you, if I couldn't have you? I don't want to buy you, Annette. I want to be chosen. But if you never can, walk away now, and I will never bother you again." She read it twice, then 3 times, each time slower than the last, and for the first time in years, she didn't know what she wanted. What would it mean to choose someone? Not for gain, not for leverage, but for no reason other than the ache they stirred in you. Could she still be Annette, the untouchable, the bold, the free, if she said yes to something as vulnerable as love? The next day, she left Akor. Not to run, but to think. She travelled to a quiet town far from the trade routes, rented a small room overlooking a mango grove. For 2 weeks, she did nothing but walk, write, and sit in silence. And there, without mirrors or spectators, she asked herself, was power still her god? Or had her hunger changed? On the 15th morning, she returned. No announcement, no fanfare. She walked through the village in plain clothes. The men looked, but didn't speak. The women stared, but didn't mock. She no longer played their game. She had become something else, entirely. She went straight to Undu's quarters. He opened the door, surprised but quiet. "I'm not here to give you an answer," she said. "I'm here because I realized I don't know how to play anymore, and maybe that's what I need." Undu stepped aside. That night, they didn't touch. They didn't kiss. They just sat. 2 people who had stopped performing. In the days that followed, there were no declarations, no deals, just shared moments, unguarded. Cooking, reading, walking. But the rumors in the village didn't stop. Some said Annette had been conquered, that she had fallen. Others whispered she had finally grown a heart, but none of them knew the truth. Annette hadn't surrendered. She had chosen. Not a man, not a future, but a version of herself that wasn't built on seduction or control, but on clarity. She still carried fire in her voice, strength in her walk, but now she also carried silence in her soul, a knowing, because love, when chosen freely, doesn't diminish power. It completes it. And sometimes the boldest thing a woman can do is not win, but feel